Can everyone hear me? It's pretty clear. Okay, I just have a few questions just so I can understand who I'm speaking with. How many are business students? Okay. How many, let's see, there's a lot of hands, so let's see, how many are not business students? Okay, pretty equal amount. And could someone just yell out a couple schools that they're from, just so I can understand the background that are not business? Engineering? Communications? Thank you. Construction, humanities? Nice. Thank you. What I'm sharing today can apply to any major you're from. And I understand that not everyone may want to be an entrepreneur, but it's an interesting topic. And what I share today can be applied to whatever career you choose to go into. And so I wanted to ask a question for you is, what do these organizations have in common? Sorry, what? Money. Innovation. Any others? And remember, some of them are government organizations. That's the Navy SEALs, that's the Special Forces. Leadership, hard work. Hey, I know you. As I've been studying these companies and interacting with some key people there, I have family within the Special Forces, some other friends working at Amazon, Google. One thing that the root of all of these answers that you gave us kind of boils down to one thing, and that is, whoa, a little cliffhanger there. You got to fix it. Thanks. Is this ideology of failing forward fast. It actually was coined by the Navy SEALs. And what it means is that they're going to experiment, but they're going to do it fast, and they're going to learn from it. In other words, forward, making that progress. And so, but how does this relate to these businesses, or how is it interpreted today that we can learn from? And it's called, there's actually two companies who apply this. It's Intuit and SpaceX, who I wanted to share a brief story about. First being SpaceX. When they would build a rocket, test it, and then launch it, if there was any malfunction, they would take months before they would even schedule another launch to redo this. SpaceX would do it the next day. They would figure out what was wrong, manufacture that part in their facility, what's going on, and then be able to launch the new rocket the next day. So they're able to fail forward fast. Intuit, huge company. How did they obtain a $30 billion valuation? They're the makers of TurboTax, QuickBooks. TurboTax, one of the best personal tax software there is. They conduct over 140 experiments per year. And if you think about the magnitude of that, that's more than one per week. And so these two companies in particular really follow this philosophy of just experimenting quickly, as cheap as possible. And so the modern interpretation of what you learn in the business school is the lean startup, or nail it, then scale it. And so what I want to do is take this philosophy and apply it to your personal lives. And so a brief review of what lean startup is, for those who may not know, is you take an idea, you test it, and you learn from it. Super simple. But it really does apply to everyone. And so I'm going to go through some use case scenarios of where it would be applicable to those who are not in the business major, or even, regardless of your major. And so this is really finicky. But in choosing your major, sometimes some of us may be in the beginning stage of our career in college, or at the later stage where you can't change your major. And so to those in the beginning, you can really rapidly test what really interests you. And it doesn't have to be just strictly in the classroom setting, because that can take semesters to figure out what is right. There are a number of online resources for you to test it, including in dating. This one's, most of you do this subconsciously, but you have this potential husband or wife, you hypothesize that they could be a good match, good fit. You go on a date and you figure that out. Multiple dates, that is. But fortunately for me, BYU helped me with that. And especially with EFY, that's where Grace and I met. We were 13, 14. But she really didn't know me until BYU, so I guess I stayed out of the radar then. But this also applies to Revelation. If you look in the Book of Mormon with the brother of Jared, and the Lord extending the challenge to the brother of Jared, how should I light the boat? You tell me. Figure it out. Create an idea, test it, learn from it, bring it back. In the workforce, some of you may be at the tail end of your college career and you're trying to figure out, is the big company, the big corporate life for me? Is government the right thing for me? Maybe even the small businesses. There are a number of questions to be answered and to be tested. Whoa. Okay, so this is my story and why Stephen Fox invited me to come speak. In the very beginning, I was accepted to West Point, the United States Military Academy. And that was a dream since the age of 8, to be able to go to the place where some of the best leaders in the United States have been born. It was a wonderful experience, and so I had this hypothesis, the military is for me. And as I was going through, completed basic training, was in my school year, Heavenly Father just kind of let me know that you needed to pivot. And I'm not saying that the only pivots have occurred from Revelation. Some of it was just common sense. But this one was a clear wake-up call. And so from that, I was able to pivot and go on my mission, go into Finland. Once I returned from Finland, I still had this idea that I wanted to become a surgeon, because in the military, I wanted to become a battalion surgeon. In other words, just a military doctor. And as I was testing that, I thought medicine would be the right thing for me. So I started taking all the pre-med classes, started interviewing all the professionals that I know of, shadowing, doing the service hours. And in that process, I learned that medicine what I really wanted to do was to coach, to consult, not necessarily treat illness. And so because of that, I was able to save so many years of education and the money. So I pursued consulting. I majored in strategy, and it was a wonderful experience. And from that experience, I was able to obtain an internship as a strategy analyst for the Department of Defense. I'm going to grab some water. But while at the Department of Defense, I was able to, I was in Japan, experience another culture, but my whole purpose there was to improve the bilateral relations between the Japanese and the Americans from the legal standpoint. And that experiment of seeing if government life was for me was just through a connection, random connection that knew that of this opportunity and that I would love to go visit Japan. I mean, my dad lived there. But the last thing, from coming back from that internship, led to entrepreneurship. And it's really an interesting story how serendipity, if that's a fair way to call it, because really Heavenly Father has a hand in everything. But in the entrepreneurship, this thing is not that reactive. I was introduced while at BYU. I saw a TV ad for the Crocker Innovation Fellowship just in the atrium. I thought, what the heck? It actually ended the deadline for that night. So I applied. Somehow I got in, and it was a wonderful opportunity. What it does is it's this 2-semester program where you're able to, they give you not literally 10 grand to you, but to your team to experiment, to learn the process of how to ideate, how to innovate upon ideas. And on top of that, how to ask the right questions, how to find the right pain points in a business. The other step that they have in this program is how to validate business models. This has changed my life, this program, and how I approach business. And the last thing was, and I mentioned it before, was the capital that it gives to experiment. Could you imagine you're in a team of 4 to 5 that are multidisciplinary? So you're having people from computer science, from the design, from what were some other schools, life sciences that were there, including with business. and you're able to go validate business ideas. In fact, that's what we did. And with that, we were able to create Novi Security. We spun a startup out of BYU. And so this was all created from the process that it taught us to go find a pain point, test that pain point, create a solution that can address that pain point, and then be able to scale it. And so this was all born from just us going to a parking lot to, which parking lot was it? It was to a mall. I think it was Southtown. And two of us were sitting in the parking lot, and people were spread across the city. And so we were trying to get as many different kind of perspectives of just observation. And one person noticed that a car alarm was going off. And what was crazy is that the car alarm would go off, but no one would know. I mean, they're probably three-quarters of a mile away inside a store listening to some, too loud of music in some retail store. They could never hear the car alarm. So we hypothesized, would someone want a car alarm security system that would notify their cell phone? And as we were interviewing, we would go door to door, and through this process, we interviewed hundreds of people to validate this. One, because we were super poor, and we only wanted to spend that money from the Crocker Fellowship on things that needed to be, that needed money, that you couldn't otherwise validate. And so through that process, we were able to pivot to home security. A lot of renters were trying to find a solution, and they didn't have a DIY, a do-it-yourself home security system that was no contract or monthly fee. And so with that nugget, that golden nugget, we took that and then started creating a solution around it and validating it to the point where we were able to raise over $1 million of capital and have already had 2 acquisition offers where we've said, no, thank you, not yet. From that, we've gotten public exposure on Live with Kelly and Michael, CNET, and Mashable. And that was all just work that was hustled. We didn't pay anyone to get that PR. And so what I wanted to share today from that experience is, if I were you, what would I have wanted someone to share with me? Say I was a sophomore, junior, freshman. And so the thing that I really wished someone would have shared with me is understanding the key elements of a founding team. So because I always wanted to be, since changing from a doctor to business, entrepreneurship is so much fun. It is hard work, but I wouldn't want it any other way. And so the 4 elements of a key founding team, there's the engineering, there's the design, there's the finance or the data analysis, and then lastly, the sales and marketing. And so I'm going to break down how you can quickly validate if this is the area you want to focus on. And even if you're about to graduate, there are plenty of resources I'm going to share that can help you test this further on. So this can apply to anyone at BYU. So the first one is within engineering. Some just high level, I know some engineers are going to probably criticize me, but there's very high level, there's hardware and software. And with it, there are some online resources to help those who haven't been in the engineering school to test it, to see if it's something they want to learn. And so there are some very, not things that would give you credibility like Code Academy or Team Treehouse, but you can even pursue boot camps. There's even one called Udacity that provides nano degrees for you to get this edge in developing that technical skill set. And so, as an example, if you go on Udacity, this online resource that's actually has courses created by these companies. For example, like a front-end developer, AT&T, Google, GitHub, and Hack Reaction came together to create a course to increase the number of people that they could hire. Because there's not enough people to fill the jobs. And so they're trying to find other ways to increase that supply. And so full stack development, even data analysis, even to the point where there's even self-driving car engineer. Now granted, that's not something you can do right now. There's tons of prerequisites, but it's fascinating to know that you can learn some of this stuff in your own time. And maybe in a few years, if you really wanted to pursue engineering. But these are some resources for you to test it cheaply to see if this is something you want to do. Yeah. So this is my wife, Grace. And she said she would interrupt.
Yeah, sometimes he forgets to say things. I just wanted to mention, when AJ did Novi, he only had a business background. And so he was meeting with all these people and creating a hardware product. And he didn't really know how to communicate with the engineers who were creating their security system, and the hardware and software engineers. And so I just know from experience, he often would say, I wish I had some background, even though I love my business degree and I love entrepreneurship and everything, I wish I had some kind of background in engineering that would help me communicate so that I was a better founder and that I can be better in the future. And so all these things that he's mentioning, it's not necessarily you're a junior and go to Udacity and figure out if you want to switch your major to engineering. It's mostly just what kind of skill sets are you interested in that could help you in the future in whatever you decide to do.
Awesome, thank you. And so one story that reemphasizes what Grace just shared is, if you're familiar with the company Airbnb, it was a company that in the beginning had 3 founders. One was, I forget their backgrounds, but more specifically, they were at Y Combinator, the top incubator in the world. And this area to help startups really grow fast. And they were at a plateau. Not enough people were signing up to be able to even get close to break even. And so there was this obstacle that they couldn't overcome until they hypothesized that the pictures in their listings were not as clear as what they could have been. So what they did was they flew to New York, found some of their best listings, and took very high quality photographs. Fortunately, one of the founders had a background in photography. He wasn't a major, that wasn't his major in school, but he had a background in it. He played with it, he really enjoyed it. And so because of that, because they took high quality photos, they were able to break over this hump. And I mean, you know the rest of the story with Airbnb, but if you talk to the founders, that is one of their key inflection points for their company, was when they started having high quality photos. And so the whole purpose of that story is the beauty of being a T-shaped person, where you may be expert in one domain, but having a taste of many different ones so you can communicate or even leverage that skill set if you need to at a later time. And so the second area was designer creative, where there's this huge need for user experience designers, from graphic designers to film and video editors. If you talk to many social media leaders, they're saying video is king. And so there's going to be a greater demand for people to have some sort of fluency in being able to leverage this technology. And there are some great resources online, even on campus. BYU has free courses to teach you how to use the Adobe Suite. So Photoshop, Illustrator, and I mean, of course there's YouTube, but you can have tutors at BYU to help you. There's one of my favorite software is Sketch for Mac laptops. And in fact, I'll show you what I created with Sketch to validate a company. And then of course there's InVision. And so what I did was, after Novi, while I was this year in school, I don't know what it is, but I love validating company ideas, because there's so much opportunity right now. And what it was, I had this hypothesis that maybe people would want to know how biased the news is, so that they can sort it out. And so what I did was, on Sketch, I mean, remember, I have zero design background, but I was able to design a very, I'd say, low fidelity app that really helped people to find the news that one is biased, one that is unbiased, and focus on the unbiased one, so they can really garner that perspective. And so this is just one page I created. Let's see if this thing will work. I mean, again, low fidelity or low quality, but what gets the job done. So I was able to put this together where people could swipe right if, say, it was right biased or left biased. And I took this app and I put it into InVision app, which then takes these, basically these pictures, and creates an interactive app with zero coding. In other words, I didn't have to spend a dime to be able to take this to a potential customer and validate it. In fact, I took it to an investor who was willing to invest, but I later said, no thank you, I don't want to pursue it, because I was able to see how much of a pain point it really was. And so these resources that I'm sharing can help you save a ton of money in pursuing any kind of idea in business. The other skill set is in finance or data analysis, accounting, understanding what happened previously in a business, finance, projecting the future. Udacity has that data analyst nano degree that you could pursue. The last one is the sales and marketing. This is the one that I'm currently focusing on because I led the sales at Novi Security. And from there, I was able to really understand the entire sales funnel, how to sell. And what I would highly recommend for you is to figure out if you want to pursue sales and marketing, or even you want to understand it, just find a sales job, or even there's a couple online resources that you can leverage to learn. General Assembly, Market Campus, in terms of digital marketing. And so, more specifically in marketing, look at all these. These are the top 10 areas that companies need in marketing, these skill sets. And so we can learn these on our own and then be able to leverage that when you go in for the job interview. And one last thing about sales is you will never regret learning how to sell. You sell in everything. Whether you are in engineering, to design, to sales and marketing, or even in operations, everyone needs to learn how to sell. So through the fail forward fast mentality, I was able to validate 4 startups and be able to work through 9 jobs/internships to figure out what I want to do and what I'm good at. And so right now, I work with a marketing investment firm, and I lead their analytics. It's been a phenomenal opportunity, and I would not have learned that or even come close to it if I didn't have the steps previously that led me to this. And one last thing about the blessing of this methodology is that it has saved me a ton of money. I know one friend who had to scrap $900,000 worth of development cost because he did not, 1, include a UX designer, but 2, he didn't approach it in the way of experimenting in the cheapest way possible. What he did was he just had an idea, had a ton of money, and threw at it. And unfortunately, it didn't work out in terms of that $900,000. Fortunately, he has other money to use, but I kind of would have liked to save that much. If he just gave me like a small percentage of that, that would be great. So I just wanted to share some last pieces of advice. And be sure, if you have any questions, write them down. Maybe we'll finish early, or we can just answer them upstairs. Happy to do whatever. But first I want to talk about simplification, simplifying our life. The art of freedom is simplification. It's taking away rather than accumulating. I remember one time Mitt Romney, he was sharing at BYU, he goes, the number one failure of most of the businesses he worked with at Bain Capital and Bain & Company is that they didn't focus. There are so many opportunities we have now, and on top of that, there's so much information. And if you think about, if you were to log how many times social media notifications or other things interrupted your focus, it's astounding just to see how much there is that we have to filter through. And so really just hone in and focus. The second thing is results. Results shut up critics every time. Every time. It's one of my close friends. He's actually working in one company. He's their CMO for hire, so to say, the chief marketing officer. And he's bringing results. And there are some people who are criticizing how he's approaching it. But because he has results, the CEO has to say, let's keep going. The next point is beat that drum. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, find what you're really good at and keep doing it. And keep doing it. Become an expert. Some of us may have read the book Outliers, or 10,000 Hour Rule to become a world-class expert. Find out what you're really good at so you don't waste time on these other things that can distract you. Yeah.
I love this concept. I think one of the things that's really important to mention is that you might spend a couple of years now figuring out what you're really good at so then you can beat that drum for the next 50 years. Because a lot of people, and it's kind of just a mentality that's been around for a while, you kind of just go through your life and you get in the job and you do it, and even if you don't really love it, you just stay there. And then later in your life, you're like, oh man, I spent 30 years at this job that I like but don't love, and now I'm older and I have a family and a mortgage and all these things, and it would be really hard for me to fail forward fast and switch over into what I love. And so now is the time to experiment. Now is your time to figure it out so that later you can spend those 30 years, instead of being stuck in a job that you don't love, instead you can spend those 30 years doing an amazing job at the thing that you love, and you can become an expert in it. And that's one thing that is really important for us, because it's been a couple of years and AJ's been figuring out what he wants to do. But now that he has a clearer vision of what he wants to do, now he can spend the next lifetime working it out and being an entrepreneur and starting businesses and doing all these things. And so it's really, really exciting for us.
The next thing I wanted to share is avoid meetings. If you look at the trend of how the workplace is evolving, more companies are becoming more remote. And because of that, you need to learn a new skill set, many skill sets, to be able to really thrive in that environment. And that is to be able to prevent having the need to be together, to meet. And so reserve meetings for decisions. And if you're able to leverage email, Slack, there's tons of other messaging apps out there. You can do a lot remotely, and it's a phenomenal skill to have. The next thing is that people are always greater than problems. I want to share an example of when I was at BYU trying to rapidly figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I regret to say it, but I burnt through relationships. There were some mentors that I didn't appreciate as much as I should have, because I was so focused on accomplishing what I needed or what I wanted. And so really take a step back too as you pursue failing forward fast, is that also keep people number one. The next one is find your one mentor. One of the best pieces of advice I've gotten from one person I really look up to is, yes, it's going to help if you get to a really prestigious company at some research facility, but the most important thing is to find someone who can mentor you, who can really help you go to the next level. And fortunately, I was able to find that with the current marketing firm. That's the reason why I took the job, was because of the mentor. User feedback. When we did a Kickstarter for Novi Security, we raised around $185,000. And I share that because the feedback we got from those users was so much better because it was from people who actually bought the product, who wanted it, compared to the people who we just interviewed and asked, what would you potentially pay for this product? Is 10x much more valuable. Granted, it helped us get to that point from the interviews, but that's the user feedback you want to listen to, those who pay. One thing I've also noticed while helping students at BYU, and I've seen this in myself, is that sometimes we fall in love with our solution over the problem. So say I met with one person recently about a dating app, and this, I understand that there are a lot of dating apps out there, but he really was passionate about the problem, and he was willing to take feedback on how to improve his solution. If you ever watch Shark Tank, you will see some entrepreneurs who are so in love with their product that when Mark Cuban just smells that love of their product over the problem, he'll just rip them apart. Every time when someone is not willing to take feedback to improve. There are a number of examples of entrepreneurs who were able to eventually succeed because they were able to pivot due to their love of the problem, not the solution. One of my favorite quotes from Teddy Roosevelt is that with self-discipline, anything is possible. In fact, I believe one of the greatest differentiators between leaders and followers is discipline. Often, I'm sure you've met some entrepreneurs who've spoken here today who say, I was not the smartest person in the room. Still not. I totally believe in that. I am not the smartest person when I co-founded Novi Security. But what separates those who really are able to knock it out of the park, it's execution. It's all about execution. Because I remember reading the Navy SEALs, they would say, why do we fail forward fast? Because we don't know everything. We work in such an uncertain environment that you don't know what to expect. And so they're going to rapidly experiment. They're going to test. They're going to practice. They're going to train until they get it right in the best environment possible. So that when the poop hits the fan, when they're on a mission, they're going to knock it out of the park. They're going to get it done. And so the last thing I wanted to share with you is I know some people, I myself at BYU was just so itching to find an idea that you're just willing to jump on anything to start something. Just my piece of advice for that is just slow down and focus on developing a skill set and just observe pain points. Engage in different activities that can expose you to different perspectives, because that will help you find the best pain point. You're going to have plenty of ideas, plenty of opportunities, but when you choose an idea, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years and a lot more money than you think to be able to take it to market. So make sure that you are still focusing on a skill set. One of my friends who co-founded Novi, he was getting his master's in statistics. Basically, he was becoming a data scientist, and he kept on working on it. And now that he moved when he graduated, he wanted to pursue that as a full-time career, and he was able to. He didn't drop out and leave that to the side because, one, startups are super risky. And so just keep that in mind. But if you have any questions, if you want to talk about any ideas you have, or even questions about testing your major or anything else, be sure to reach out to me. LinkedIn, email. Happy to do so. So thank you for your time.